Many people find that the moon is magical to stare at from a distance, but it can be equally as enchanting to view it from up close through a telescope. A lot of the craters that litter the lunar surface have been named after people who have contributed to science, people that are recognized as some of the most brilliant minds in recorded history. For example, Tycho is an impact crater that is named after a famous Danish astronomer of the 16th century. Copernicus is a crater named after the famous mathematician and astronomer who proposed that the sun, rather than the earth, was at the center of the universe. Kepler is a crater named after the German astronomer who was a key figure in the 17th century scientific revolution, probably best known for his laws of planetary motion. He also has a famous space telescope that's named after him, which is now used to search for exoplanets, that is, planets that are outside of our solar system. Aristarchus is named after an ancient Greek astronomer who suspected that the stars were just other bodies similar to our own sun. So you can see that these and many other craters, not to mention other lunar features such as mountain ranges, can be clearly seen through a telescope, or if you don't have access to one, you can take a look at some of the fascinating footage that has been uploaded online, mostly disseminated freely by amateurs, that contain just enough detail that if you look very closely, you might even be able to make out tiny metallic objects that seem to be leaving one of the craters near the side of the moon that never faces the Earth. Now, I obviously can't verify these, but there is another crater. There's one in particular that I would like to draw your attention to that's on the dark side of the moon. And this crater is named after Jack Parsons, an American rocket and propulsion engineer, one of the principal founders of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or JPL, and a high priest in a cult founded by sex magician and occult author Aleister Crowley. Jack Parsons would invoke Aleister Crowley's Hymn to Pan before each rocket test. To get a better idea or a feel for Crowley's poetry, let us listen to him briefly recite a few verses in his own voice. This one is titled Pentagram.
In the years of the primal force, in the dawn of terrestrial birth, man mastered the mammoth and horse, and man was the lord of the earth. He made him an hollow skin from the heart of an holy tree. He compassed the earth therein, and man was the lord of the sea. He controlled the vigorous steam. He harnessed the lightning for hire. He drove the celestial team, and man was the lord of the fire. Deep-mouthed from their thrones, deep-seated, the choirs of the eons declare the last of the demons defeated. For man is the lord of the air. Arise, O man, in thy strength. The kingdom is thine to inherit, till the high gods witness at length that man is the lord of his spirit.
Aleister Crowley perceived Jack Parsons with high regard, as someone who may one day be his successor. Crowley made his respect and admiration clear when confiding in another member and saying, and I quote, "Parsons is the most valued member of the whole order, with no exception," end quote. Jack Parsons was a chemist, but a better term might be alchemist. He is credited with inventing a solid type rocket fuel, revolutionizing the entire industry, so much so that former Nazi rocket scientist and the head of NASA, Wernher von Braun, called Parsons the father of American rocketry. JPL was established during the early 1940s, which also happened to be during World War II. As many people now know, thanks to declassified documents, the United States brought thousands of Nazi scientists over both during and immediately following the war in what is known as Operation Paperclip. So the American scientist, Jack Parsons, was working shoulder to shoulder with German scientists with similar occult philosophies. One of the problems that the United States had was that they were so far behind the Germans, not only in technology in the context that most people understand, such as with jet engines, but in paranormal research, which to the majority of the US sounded exactly like science fiction. This leads us to L. Ron Hubbard, a fairly successful science fiction author before the war, who, like his father, was naval intelligence. Drawing upon his imaginative background in science fiction, Hubbard was called up to try to make sense of what the Nazis were working on, with the expectation that the US would benefit somehow, either by making weapons, gaining technology, or at least learning more about their very secretive enemy and their bizarre activities. This is why L. Ron Hubbard, author of Dianetics, The Modern Science of Mental Health, and the founder of the Church of Scientology, not only gained exposure to mind control technology and an elevated understanding of the workings of the mind, he also was one of the first people, if not the very first individual, to start denouncing many of the newly formed CIA activities, which can all be lumped together and called MK Ultra, which stands for mind control. In German, it's spelled with a K. So Hubbard was Jack Parsons' roommate in Pasadena, California, where they participated in occult sex orgies together. Hubbard was deeply into the occult from an early age.
A magician, the magic cults of the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th centuries in the Middle East were fascinating. The only modern work that has anything to do with them is a trifle wild in spots, but it's fascinating work in itself, and that's work written by Aleister Crowley, the late Aleister Crowley, my very good friend. And he did himself a splendid piece of aesthetics built around those magic cults. It's a very interesting reading to get a hold of a copy of a book, quite rare, but it can be obtained, The Master Theorem, Theron, The Master Theorem by Aleister Crowley. He signs himself the Beast, the mark of the beast, 666. Very, very something.
While there has been debate as to the degree of influence Aleister Crowley has had on L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology, let's see what L. Ron Hubbard's son has to say.
My first guest, Ron DeWolf, was the son of the missing L. Ron Hubbard. Let's give him a big round of applause, please.
His deep involvement in personal use of drugs on himself and others, black magic.
When you say black magic, what are you talking about? I mean, some of the things that I read in the stack of material, it sounds just absolutely unbelievable. What are you talking about when you say this?
Well, the funny thing is that the actual truth is about as far out as Scientology itself. really the basis of Scientology, which is rather hidden and covered over, is the occult, the deep involvement with satanic powers. That he felt that he was deeply involved with a British black magician called Aleister Crowley, and through putting himself in deep hypnotic trances and the use of drugs on himself, he wanted to become the most powerful being in the world.
How would you describe what Scientology is all about and what the Church of Scientology is all about?
Well, to put it in layman's sort of a succinct terms, Scientology says basically that 74 trillion years ago, everyone willed themselves into existence, and through space opera games and science fiction sort of things, they have created this universe. This is a universe created by you, me, and everybody else. And now we find ourselves trapped into bodies, and the goal of Scientology is to get untrapped from these bodies and to return to this godlike state which is called operating Satan.
How do you do that?
Through applied philosophy, through sitting down across from each other in chairs with e-meters, which is a skin galvanometer with a meter dial on it, and through answering questions and asking questions. This is supposed to release the various charges and the problems one has had throughout all of these centuries and hundreds and thousands of reincarnations, to get the charge off it as if it was these incidents were a charged battery, and by doing so, this is supposed to return you to this state of high ability. He was very deeply involved in black magic from early teenage years, which was the use of drugs and hypnosis as an example. He used to conjure up these demons and thereby plug into them or have them plug into him, and a lot of his early writing was, which could be called spirit writing. And so he was very deeply involved in black magic as an example, especially from Aleister Crowley, which was an English black magician. And around 1947 or so, he decided that he was the Beast 666 incarnate, because that's what Aleister Crowley was, and he died in 1947.
While Crowley was a high-level Freemason, there are reports that L. Ron Hubbard was a Rosicrucian, at least for a brief period in 1940. The Ancient and Mystic Order of the Rosy Cross, as the organization is formally known, has the symbol of a cross with a rose at its center. It has several meanings, depending on the source, some claiming that the Rosy Cross predates Christianity, where the cross represents the human body and the rose represents the individual's unfolding consciousness. That's one interpretation. Looking at this cross, we can clearly see 8 points, which can be traced back to the 8-pointed star of Inanna of Sumer and Ishtar of ancient Babylon. This covert form of goddess worship was infused into the European secret societies by the Knights Templar. The Templars called themselves the Poor Knights of Christ, with 2 knights symbolically sharing one horse. Is this symbolic of the altruistic sharing of a horse, or does the close proximity of 2 men here have another meaning, especially since the core teaching involved the Kabbalah and ritual sex magic?
It has been widely rumored that the top echelons have been engaging for centuries in homosexual practices, that they have been using these homosexual practices for mind control, not just for horizontal recreation or for kinky horizontal recreation, but for the specific purposes of mind control and of influencing their members. We have nothing against probably 95% of all gays that are basically practicing recreational homosexuality. What we're interested in here is the very small percentage of gay men that happen also to belong to the social subset of secret societies, and especially the most high echelons of these secret societies that engage in homosexuality for totally different purposes, namely for mind control, for social control, and so on. I've heard, for example, stories that the highest echelons of the Knights Templars are a sodomic society. What would you say on that matter?
Well, I think that's true. I think that's borne out. And in fact, when the King of France, I think it was Philip, went after the Templars, homosexuality was one of the reasons for the crackdown on them. But of course, what he really wanted was the fortune, the great treasure which the Templars had amassed, and also he felt that they were a political threat, and so he would gain several objectives at one time, and also gain their treasure by attacking them on the, by then, I think, well-established grounds of homosexual practices.
So basically there is no way for somebody to go that high in the hierarchy of these organizations without being homosexual, at least in the Knights Templars.
I think not. I think it's almost like a very advanced initiation ceremony, and of course engaging in homosexual practices becomes a final committal to the innermost purposes of the order. And once you've done that, and I guess there's no coming back really, once you've been initiated into homosexual operations or activities, there's really, you can no longer be a non-homosexual. There's no coming back from that. And I think that they realized this, and that they wanted this as the final commitment from the official.
How about Freemasonry? Have you heard any stories about the highest echelons of Freemasonry engaging in?
Well, if you go back into the most ancient times, religion has always had sex connected to it, and especially the occult religions. Ancient world had a very heavy influence on sex. Sex was used in all of the rituals,
and especially
words and terms and
black
symbols.
magic sex.
Absolutely, and I believe that the people who are at the top of the world today are using sexual magic, and I think that's probably why so much sex is flaunted in movies, television.
The sexual revolution
Yes,
itself,
yeah.
free
It's
sex.
all part of not a revolution just for freedom and free sex, but it has an integral part to play in the overall occult movements of the world to open the human mind up to sexual perversion. Also lowers the inhibition in a human being to accept anything. And once you have compromised your morals in that way, you are now ready to be compromised with money.
The next step.
The next step, and with power, and then you've been bought. So
because I've heard that basically the highest levels of Freemasonry are quite a bit into homosexuality,
it
and
should not surprise me.
it becomes basically a very cozy boys club, and in a way an initiation into the next and higher degree is probably all the members of that secret Masonic cell taking turns at the
Well, I have one such
newcomer.
teacher.
Eustace, what would you say about another and very interesting secret society, namely the Skull and Bones? Because this is a secret society not of elderly men that have reached the 33rd or the 38th degree of Freemasonry, but these are young kids in the 21-year-old or third year of college that are initiated in that society. Have you heard of any homosexual overtones?
Oh yes, the initiation ceremony of Skull and Bones, which finally began to leak out after many years of total secrecy. The fact is that the initiate into Skull and Bones, first of all, he has to strip off all his clothing, then he has to lie down in a coffin, and there he recites every sexual experience that he has had throughout his entire life, whether with male or female or what they did. And so this is in the presence of his brothers, you see, the fraternity brothers. So in other words, he is totally confessing all of his sexual activity of his life to that time, And they are now in possession of this knowledge so that they have not merely a weapon of blackmail, but a weapon of control, because whenever he sees one of his fraternity brothers around the campus, he knows that that brother knows all of his innermost secrets of his life. And in other words, you place yourself totally in their hands. And the Skull and Bones, of course, was set up by the Russell Trust in 1858 as a branch of the German Illuminati. And apparently this is also an Illuminati technique, probably developed by the Jesuits, to force the initiate to place his personal history and all of his secrets in the hands of his fellow members. And then after this recitation of his personal secrets, he then stands up and is supposedly born again as a new person under the guise of the Illuminati Skull and Bones. And the members of this fraternity, by the way, there are other fraternities on Yale University, but it was generally known by the students there that Skull and Bones was the peak. In fact, a Yale student told me one day, he said, it was known on the campus that if you were tapped for bones, you were set for life. You would never have to worry about career or fortune, because you would be taken care of. And only 15 seniors each year are tapped, you see.
Yeah.
And they are from the most elite families, the Harrimans, the Rockefellers, and the Bushes. His family was an employee of the Harriman interests, and so that's how Bush was chosen.
Families that have been for many generations into Satanism and black magic and secret societies.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly, an element of this branch of occult initiation involves the attempted awakening of the Kundalini in men through prostate stimulation, a subject that I will absolutely not cover here, but for those seeking more information, competent online presentations can be found for free by Montauk Chia, a Buddhist master or Taoist practitioner from Thailand, who I have no affiliation with, but I feel offers a well-articulated alternative perspective for people in the West, coming from an Eastern perspective that has been closely guarded by emperors and monks for centuries. While the harnessing and control of sexual energy does play a large part in occult practices, so does the field of numerology. I try to stress the importance of numbers in the occult with the title of one of my books, 1666, Redemption Through Sin, emphasizing the inescapable importance sacred geometry has always played in Kabbalistic works. Incidentally, 1666 was the year that a Turkish-born man named Sabbatai Zevi was declared to be the Messiah by roughly half of the world's Jewish population of the time. Zevi declared that redemption was available through acts of sin, which included incest and especially religious orgies, which are still practiced today by his modern-day followers in Turkey, known as the Donme.
I heard about these orgies that they were having between couples together. They do it within the family, even with children and parents involved.
They are secret Jews. They always marry among themselves.
We know that Donme had a secret religious life, something between their Muslim appearance and their real Jewish believing.
Purim was his favorite holiday. That was the annual wife swappers holiday. It was called Extinguishing the Lights. And by his order, the Jews swapped wives. All over the world, this was not a local phenomenon. Now, all the books say the same thing, that Shabtai Tzvi gained prominence from Iran to Mexico. All over the world, the Messiah was going to come, and he announced the date. And this date, by the way, is significant. He declared he was the Messiah on June 18th of 1666. June, of course, is the 6th month. 18 is 6 times 3, and we don't have to, 666 is obvious enough. And on that day, all of a sudden, it was the time of redemption, and the Jews could do anything they wanted. You know his prayer, the prayer that the Jews quoted, were "Blessed be he who permits the forbidden." That was the actual Sabbatean prayer. And the Jews went through an orgy worldwide. Again, the Christians would call it Satanism, but it was certainly he changed Judaism in the worst possible way.
Very few people have heard of Sabbatai Zevi, who declared himself the Messiah in 1666. By proclaiming redemption was available through acts of sin, he amassed a following of over 1 million passionate believers, which was about half of the world's Jewish population during the 17th century. Although many rabbis at the time considered him a heretic, his fame extended far and wide. Sabbatai's adherents planned to abolish many ritualistic observances because, according to the Talmud, holy obligations would no longer apply in the Messianic time. Fasting days became days of feasting and rejoicing. Sabbateans encouraged and practiced sexual promiscuity, adultery, incest, and religious orgies.
My next guest participated in human sacrifice rituals and cannibalism. She says her family has been involved in rituals for generations. Does everyone else think it's a nice Jewish family? From the outside, you appear to be a nice Jewish girl.
Definitely.
And you all are worshiping the devil inside the home?
Right. There's other Jewish families across the country. It's not just my own family.
Really? You don't have to give us the gory details, but what kinds of things went on in the family?
Well, there would be rituals in which babies would be sacrificed, and you would have to,
Whose babies?
There were people who bred babies in their family. No one would know about it. A lot of people were overweight, so you couldn't tell if they were pregnant or not. Or they would supposedly go away for a while and then come back.
Yeah, you witnessed the sacrifice?
Right. When I was very young, I was forced to participate in that, in which I had to sacrifice an infant.
And the purpose of sacrifice is to what? Is to bring you what? What are you sacrificing for?
For power.
Uh-huh. Were you raised with a sense of right and wrong, Rachel?
Yeah. I mean, it's like I had both. I mean, to the outside world, everything we did was proper and right, and then there were the nights that things changed, that things just got turned around. What was wrong was right, and what was right was wrong.
My name is Robert Sepper. I'm an author and anthropologist, and would like to invite you to join me in awakening from a long amnesia. Species with Amnesia, Our Forgotten History, Gods with Amnesia, Subterranean Worlds of Inner Earth, The Occult Secrets of Vril, and 1666, Redemption Through Sin. I would like to thank my subscribers who share my posts, as I rely on word of mouth, and I appreciate all of the positive feedback, reviews on my books, and I thank you very much for listening.